If you're a fellow history enthusiast or survival-minded thinker, this guide is going to hit you with the kind of raw, unpolished truth you rarely hear outside deep archival circles. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future deep dive survival history breakdowns. What you're about to hear isn't the romanticized wartime nostalgia people like to package online. These are the real strategies civilians in besieged, starving cities used to stay alive when the rules of society, nutrition, and even personal pride collapsed under the weight of desperation. Soldiers, men who already lived rough, were stunned by what everyday families resorted to. The point here isn't shock value. It's understanding the mindset, improvisation and resourcefulness that emerge when absolutely everything else fails. And yes, these lessons still carry over into real-world survival thinking today. How civilians stretch dead ingredients soldiers refused to touch. One of the starkest hacks came from civilians learning to turn completely stale, rock-hard bread into something edible for another week or more. Soldiers on the front considered old bread useless, but civilians in blockaded cities like Leningrad and Warsaw couldn't afford that luxury. They soaked stale loaves in hot water mixed with a trace of fat. Anything from rendered animal scraps to leftover drippings, to revive them into a kind of dense mash. Once rehydrated, the mixture could be pressed into pans, rebaked and cut like fresh bread. The modern survival application is straightforward. Any hard, dry food becomes workable again with moisture and fat. In a crisis scenario, even pasta, grains or dried tortillas can be revived with this method, extending calories when no new supplies are coming. How families turned wallpaper into food when flour ran out. One of the darkest adaptations came from the fact that old wallpaper paste often contained potato starch or wheat starch as a binder. Civilians scraped wallpaper from the walls, soaked it, and strained off whatever starch they could extract. This produced a thin, glue-like porridge that provided just enough calories to keep a person from collapsing. While obviously not something to replicate today, the underlying principle matters. Civilians understood their environment so deeply that they recognized overlooked sources of carbohydrate. In modern survival terms, it's a reminder that calorie sources exist in unexpected places, and knowing the composition of materials around you, whether plants, roots or processed goods, can give you an edge when normal food sources vanish. How civilians extracted fat from bones soldiers discarded. When soldiers butchered animals, they often left behind bones considered too bare to bother with. Civilians quickly learned to heat these bones slowly for hours to leach out every remaining bit of fat. The result was a thin, greasy film skimmed from the top of the pot, stored in jars and used sparingly to enrich otherwise nutrient-poor meals. This small addition made the difference between starvation and survival. A practical modern takeaway is the value of slow extraction. Bones, seeds and fibrous roots still contain usable nutrients even after initial processing. With time, heat and patience, you can pull more value from ingredients that would normally go to waste. So, here's how people created protein substitutes from burned grains. When grain stores were bombed or soaked with rain and mold, civilians didn't throw them out. Instead, they roasted the moldy grains over high heat until the outer contaminated layers burned away, leaving a bitter but still edible core. Ground into meal, this became a protein and calorie substitute soldiers unfamiliar with siege life had never seen. The survival lesson here is in understanding the thresholds of what is salvageable. High heat, drying and grinding can rehabilitate certain compromised foods. It isn't pleasant, but it can keep you alive. Now, let's talk about how civilians made meat from plant scraps and sawdust. This was, honestly, one of the hacks that genuinely shocked soldiers when they saw it firsthand. Civilians mixed tiny amounts of real meat scraps with ground tree bark, dried weeds and finely sifted sawdust from clean, untreated wood to create patties that resembled meat. The patties were bound with flour or starch and fried to mask the texture. While obviously not something anyone should replicate nutritionally, the principle behind it is critical. Extending limited proteins with fibrous, bulking agents. Today, the safe version of that strategy is learning to extend proteins with legumes, oats, or finely chopped vegetables, allowing small quantities of meat to stretch much further in an emergency. During those hard times, folks got creative with their morning cup. In occupied territories, coffee pretty much vanished, so civilians started making substitutes by roasting anything that could mimic that familiar bitterness. Acorns, sugar beets, barley, even dandelion roots. The roasting process, drove off moisture and brought out these caramelized flavors, and surprisingly, the resulting drink was actually tolerable for many soldiers. The practical lesson here is that roasted roots and seeds can provide comfort beverages, and sometimes that morale boost is just as important as calories. Even today, dandelion root coffee is still around, and making it requires nothing more than a bit of washing, chopping, roasting, and grinding. People also had to get inventive with vegetables that had seen better days. Spoiled cabbages, frost-damaged potatoes, and limp root vegetables were still precious. Civilians turned to fermentation, using salt and thyme, to transform these questionable veggies into something sour, stable, and safe to eat. Fermentation, in fact, kills harmful microbes and preserves nutrients. Now, soldiers weren't really used to seeing vegetables brought back to life this way, but for civilians, it was a lifeline. Honestly, in modern survival situations, knowing how to ferment can turn borderline produce into safe, long-lasting food, all without the need for refrigeration. Another thing that might surprise you, families used animal blood as a high-value food source. Whenever livestock was slaughtered, civilians would collect the blood before the soldiers discarded it. They'd mix it with barley, onions, or whatever grains they could find, then boil it all into a thick pudding. This provided iron, protein, and essential nutrients at a time when deficiency diseases were everywhere. While it's not a common practice today, the lesson is still clear. Recognizing nutrient-dense byproducts and knowing how to prepare them safely can honestly make a huge difference in survival situations. These 8 hacks, you see, reveal something far deeper than just resourcefulness. They show a mindset built on a total unwillingness to waste anything, on understanding the chemistry of food even without formal training, and on adapting under real pressure. So, if you found these insights valuable and you want more in-depth survival history content like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel, share this guide with other history enthusiasts, and keep exploring the forgotten techniques that once meant the difference between life and death.